African proverb says the child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel the warmth. What time in your life have you been closest to starting the fire? 16 years old. Finally decided to fight back against abusive parents. Only had to do it once to stop the physical abuse. The brain fucks kept happening. It's so terrible when the people that are supposed to protect you are your abusers. I'm so sorry you've had to live through this. I didn't grow up with the best family. There was a long period of time where there was constant fighting, and things often went too far. I didn't feel safe in many different ways. It all culminated to a point when I was 17, disowned, and about to get kicked out. But my vindictive, defensive actions in the past made my mother know that kicking me out wasn't a good idea. I know the only reason I could have a roof over my head was because my mom isn't a citizen, and she knew I would have reported her for the crime of child abuse, which did happen, which would have put her residency in jeopardy. So, I guess I had to threaten to burn the village in order to feel the warmth of safety. Edit. A lot of people are assuming my mother is illegal, but she's not. I'm not exactly sure the mechanism through which she can stay in the United States, but she married my dad, American, and they got divorced. She can live and work here, but she doesn't have the full protection of the government like me. I had a coworker at a non-commission based retail job where a coworker would repeatedly sabotage my sales so she could get a lot of credit apps and a high GSP, average hour sales. She would overhear my pitch for cards, required, and then lie to the customer so they would apply. I would have to try and rectify what she said while she hovered over me. She did many other questionable things, and I reported her multiple times, as did my coworkers and customers. Now, one time I got lucky and an 18-yo kid came in, "Yo, buy the most expensive desktop we have on display. 5K. She saw me do this sale, but I needed a manager to approve a tiny discount. But my radio was dead. Coworker was watching me the entire time, so I asked if she'd call for the manager. She stone cold ignores me. I go for the MGR. She prints out paperwork on the computer and tries to sell it to him. When I return, she literally yells at me in front of the customer to give her the sale. BC, she worked too. I ignored her and didn't give her the sale. When I reported this, as did the customer, he was mortified. I was literally told by my boss, ignore when she does that. She's a middle child, so she does stuff like that. I was tired of the stupid lack of action, so I filed an HR complaint regarding her, and 5 of my managers for not addressing it. They all got reamed for it. Only one is still in a management position, the rest were eventually demoted or laid off. When I was a teenager living in rural Alabama, I did not get along with my stepmother. She went out of her way to be as mean as she could to me. Once when she left the house, she took the mouse for the family computer with her so I couldn't use it while she was gone. Well, I did her one better by taking a cord from the back, then locking myself in my bedroom until she got home. She uses my little baby stepsister against me and tells her to tell me she has a present for me. As soon as I unlock the door, stepmother yanks it out of my hand and starts screaming at me about why the computer won't work. Well, let me tell you, on both sides of me I had a steel pole lying against the wall and a simple glass of water. I briefly entertained the notion of smashing her in the face with the pole, and instead just chucked the harmless water in her face. I'm quite sure I avoided jail that night. I used to work in fast food, and was the only person in the store that didn't smoke. Everyone else got to take a break to smoke, but since I didn't smoke, I wasn't allowed to. Eventually, I spoke to the owner about it and was rebuffed, so I went over their heads to the company board. Owner got his ass chewed out for rebuffing me and I wound up getting a huge bonus my next paycheck, but when they discovered I reported them, I got fired immediately. Turns out they'd been violating company policy in food prep and storage, so I filed another report to corporate. Store got shut down for months and my former boss got fined 6 figures. My dad didn't seem to take any interest in my life since I was 4, then when my mom left him and I told him I was going to leave, he then proceeded to do everything to get me to live with him, buying me stuff, telling me mom isn't a fit parent, trying to get custody in court. I decided to live with him because I was too scared to start a new school midway through the year. He then dates this woman who was pretty much the catalyst in destroying their marriage and gets mad at me when I don't treat her like a mother. Mom is now trying to get custody and I would burn his house to the ground if it meant she would win. Just go and live with her. Refuse to go back. Your dad will have to go through the system to get you back. True, the cops might take you back to him once or maybe even twice, but ultimately if you are stubborn enough the cops will refuse to do your father's bidding and tell him to take it to court. Trust me on this. Just go to your mom now. I would, but she doesn't have a house right now. She's living with her brother and I also want to finish the school year. She should have full custody by June. Wife was a senior staff for a local science fiction convention. Not only was she an unpaid volunteer, she had to take a vacation day off work and pay for her hotel room and parking. On the morning that the convention started, she was setting up the first of the 3 rooms she was responsible for: manual labor, moving tables, setting up shelves and loading them with stuff, and somebody came in, took her ID badge off her desk, and brought it to the convention's lost and found. Convention LF lady told wife that lost badges have a $5 fee to get them back. Wife looked at the badge, looked at her, and said, "Keep it, I'm going home. Have a nice convention." Wife was about 25 feet down the hall when LF lady caught up to her and returned her badge. Wow! It was like they were trying to burn down their own village at that point. More like setting a nuke on their own village. The lady is working for free, and you have the nerve to make her pay you some made-up fee. I can absolutely attest to being around people who were love-starved and then subsequently self-sabotaging or otherwise destructive. In a softer sense, if I have felt rejected, I have felt peace in sort of burning bridges to find myself. May the bridges you burn light the way forward. Just make sure you're off the bridge and no longer need it prior to burning it. Moved to a new town, and started going to a new church when dad got cancer. Went to church and told the pastor to try and get advice. Pastor announced this to the convocation, and also told everyone that some lady's horse was sick. Watched the entire convocation console this lady about her sick horse. The convocation was in tears about some sick horse while my dad was dying. No one said a word to my family. Never been to church since. Oh, that's awful. I'm from the UK, so many of us are not brought up in any religion. But, my friend was starting to go to our local church and she just received news that her boss's new baby, a few days old, had unexpectedly died. Totally distraught, she went to church and had a word with the vicar asking could the baby be mentioned in the please pray for section of the service. She was appalled when the first question asked was the baby Christian? As if any other baby would not be worth mentioning in the service. When a clearly upset parishioner needed the support of the church at that time, she never went again. Here's a meme for you to enjoy while you're subscribing to our channel. We'll have new videos for you every day, so stay tuned. Whenever I'm in a meeting and my suggestions are getting consistently ignored and I'm getting interrupted and talked over, I get the weirdest urge to prove I still exist by jumping on the table and busting out the Queen of the Night aria. Edit. There's a lot of good advice in the replies. I will say that in about 60% of my meetings this is never an issue, and in the other 40% it's an issue because of a few specific coworkers who resort to just yelling if confronted politely. Their managers have been made aware of this. Bring an air horn, then just continue talking as if nothing interrupted you. I cannot guarantee the success of this strategy. I've personally tested that in conversations and it's mostly pissed everyone off, which is both funny and hypocritical. Oh man, middle school for me. I was heavy bullied at school, mentally and physically. I wasn't getting any support at home or felt like I was. I was not in a good place then. I had so many negative thoughts of hurting others and myself. Thankfully I never had a gun or I would have become one of those school shooters. That how bad and deep in depression I was in. I did end up in a psych ward and man, those places are terrible. I didn't get any help but only learned to bottle my shit up more. When I had been bullied constantly in 7th grade by 3 different kids/groups of kids and the school showed so little interest in helping me. I was physically bullied, verbally mocked, humiliated in front of the other kids, and not an I was batted. When I finally took my mom's advice to make a scene the next time someone started throwing things at me, I did it. We were outside that day for PE. And while we were all sitting in lines at the start of class, a kid in the line next to me started throwing pebbles at me. I ignored it for a moment, then when he kept going I yelled at him to stop. I didn't care that people were staring. I wanted them to. I wanted them to see that this average height, able-bodied boy was throwing things at me, a very small and disabled girl. The teacher came over and asked what happened. Kid told him they were only pebbles. He wasn't hurting me. The teacher agreed with him and told me if I ever disrupted his class like that again I was getting detention. I don't know what it is about some teachers, but the second they get put in charge of more than one child they become absolutely blind to any kind of bullying, and if it gets pointed out to them, they think that particular incident exists in a vacuum and couldn't possibly be a sign of anything worse. I was 11 years old and suicidal because I felt so incredibly powerless. That teacher only solidified that feeling. When I was a kid my dad used to beat on me pretty often. When he was sober I usually did something to deserve it. When he wasn't it was just go time. One night, I was 14, he got drunk and when I got home from a girlfriend's place he cornered me and put a revolver to my head. He told me how worthless I was and that he would be doing me a favor by killing me. I didn't respond. I didn't move. I just waited for him to pull the trigger. He didn't. He left my room and left the revolver on my dresser as he walked out. I took the revolver and went out. I walked around my hometown, sat by the river and thought about all the ways I could get back at him for all the misery he caused my mother, sister, and I. I also considered doing the old Kurt Cobain, but that's not relevant. I took the weapon apart and threw its pieces in the river. No one's asked me about the gun since. It's probably still there. Edit. Holy shit, that blew up. Thanks for all the upvotes and awards, everyone. My brother is 10 years younger than me and is a teenager. I regularly drive him around to see his girlfriend and to his classes. Recently he's becoming very disrespectful and downright rude. He's only nice to me if I've made food or if he needs a ride, and in a way that pisses me off even more. The amount of times I have seriously considered pulling over and making him walk the last 10 miles home. You shouldn't drive him around. Just don't drive him around if he's disrespectful. Working in public accounting as an auditor, 65+ hour weeks, getting yelled at by clients for things that aren't your fault, getting chewed out by your manager for being over/under budgeted hours for a client, staying in hotels 5 days a week during busy season, eating poorly because you never had time to cook. Let's just say one of the best days of my life was when I got laid off from that place, which opened the door for a great opportunity with none of the issues listed above. Grew up with an incredibly privileged but emotionally abusive family. I never really fit in. They would frequently gaslight me with so much, but one that made me feel like I was going crazy was that they all hated each other but would act like I was the only one to fight with anyone else and band together in that. I've moved out now, but there were many nights when I felt like I was going crazy and that I could burn that house down and not look back. Glad I didn't though. Always a better way out. Edit. Wow, not a huge Redditor. First comment I've had with any real engagement. It's nice to hear there's other people who've dealt with the same stuff and still surviving as well. Nice to know peeps aren't alone in it. Stay strong, happy living. My old job. A lot of people quit when I did. They'll survive, but the atmosphere isn't nearly as light anymore because all the fun people left except one, and now the turnover rate is ridiculously high. Already am. Therapy is a magical thing where you learn to burn down anything that is bad for you, and then you take it to your family. My family seems to be somewhat accepting of me burning down the stupidity that is hurting us all, and leaving the nice things, though. Probably my relationship with my dad. My step-cunt was always, well, a cunt, and I finally got the courage to tell him how I couldn't stand her and she was rude to me when he wasn't around, and I didn't want to go to his house anymore for fear of the bullying from her and her kids. He told me she wasn't leaving and I needed to get over it. We didn't talk much for 13 years. Fast forward to today and she has the audacity to tell people she has granddaughters, my kids. But for the sake of my mending relationship with my dad, I don't go and set her straight, and tell her to fuck off. God, I hate that woman. The church/group of churches/pseudo-cult I grew up in was very much this way. Didn't go to the right school? Shun. Didn't send your kids to the Bible summer camp? Shun. Your kid/spouse/family member sinned in a public way? Shun. Not a married 20-something with 3 kids and actively a leader? Shun. Took me 20 years to see through the bullshit, and another 7 to finally truly feel free. I'd burn all that shit to the ground for the hell they put every person through. Edit. For those asking, I grew up in the Churches of Christ, a fundamentalist group mostly in the southeastern US. Very untwined history with Mormonism though. We actually influenced them a bit. Look up Sidney, Rigdon and Alexander Campbell if you want the cliff notes.